How do I deal with an extremely negative wife who thinks she's always entitled to criticize even when asked to stop? My 41M wife, 40F, is very negative and constantly criticizes everything and everyone, including me and our 2 kids. We've been married 15 years and this has been her behavior since the beginning, but it's only in recent years that I've really seen it and gotten increasingly intolerant of it. Both of her siblings are this way too, and they definitely learned it from their mother. I asked her today what she would like to do for Valentine's Day, and she started immediately by criticizing me for all the things I always do on VD that she doesn't like, even though a lot of it was blatant mischaracterization. Frustrated, I kept asking her to tell me what she wants to do. Not what she doesn't want. She says I'm just controlling her, but I maintain that I'm asking for an answer that's positive rather than negative. There are infinite ways to get it wrong, but very few ways to get it right, so telling me what she doesn't want isn't terribly informative or helpful. Plus, the criticism doesn't exactly inspire romance. She is like this in all other arenas of life. She cannot maintain good, long-term relationships with anyone because eventually they do something she doesn't like, and then she begins the process of criticism and talks herself into believing they aren't worthy of having a relationship with her and lets it die. After 15 years of marriage, we've been through a lot, and it's been much worse than necessary because of her constant negativity. The strength of our marriage has been tenuous in recent years as it is, and from my perspective it's almost entirely due to her constant criticism. Not to say I haven't also contributed, I have. I've told her how anyone can point out a flaw or something to criticize about anything or anyone, always, and that doing so unnecessarily degrades the quality of the relationship, interaction. She won't hear it. In her mind, she is always entitled to criticize, and that if I don't like it, it's because I'm just too immature to hear it. She is extremely dismissive of my feelings. We've both been to therapy and marriage counseling in years past, which helped us work through a lot of issues, but in my mind this is the last great hurdle in our marriage. It has caused me, and especially the kids, a tremendous amount of undue grief to deal with her constant criticism and resulting emotional outbursts. I know that if she were to see this post, it would only fuel the fire rather than cause her any amount of self-reflection. I'm open to more counseling, but she is not, and says she knows better than the therapists at this point, after she had a disagreement with our last therapist. TLDR, how do I manage a spouse who only understands how to be negative and critical?
My dad was you, my mom was your wife. I prayed for them to get divorced so that even if it were only for half the time I would finally not have to deal with her constant emotional terrorism. My dad refused to leave. I was forced to bear the brunt of her emotional abuse and carry the scars of it to this day. At age 35 I attempted suicide twice. My dad became an alcoholic. I got married during the pandemic, so I had an excuse not to invite them. My mother continues to be an absolute nightmare to everyone around her. She will never stop. Please give you kids the chance I never had.
Divorce her already. You've given it a solid try. Your children are suffering at the hands of her emotionally abusive behavior. Why are you forcing your kids to be around someone who sounds horrible? You've already tried therapy. You've tried so many things, and yet she has not changed. She is constantly negative, derogatory and condescending. She dismisses your concerns and sounds demeaning and selfish to the core. She does not care how her behavior affects others. Being happy on your own is far better than being with someone miserable like she is.
My mom is highly critical of me and my siblings growing up, but really it was just me. I'm on medication for anxiety. I've been seeing a therapist for years now to undo what she did to me, and best of all for my mental health. I cut contact about 10 years ago. She never changed, was always the victim in her own life story. Welcome to her future. And for your children, I had an ulcer at 23 and still have stomach problems, chronic migraines, and am on 3 prevention medications daily. I'm doing better, but it's been a hard road.
I'd suggest looking up a book called Stop Walking on Eggshells and see if it applies. It might help, but either way, you need to protect your kids by getting them out of that situation as best you can. Even if it's only half the time, you're already seeing the effects it's having on them, so protect them.
This was my parents. Their hypercritical nature destroyed me as a child. You need to get her into therapy, even ketamine therapy if she's willing. Take it from somebody who knows. This severely fucked up my relationship with my parents. To the point we rarely talk. Drag her if you have to. She needs to work out the issues driving that critical nature in a professional environment. Ways you can lift up your kids: constantly remind them it's not normal, or they'll learn to see it as the way people just are and adapt it to their personalities. Constantly tell them you love them, that they're worthy and talented and you respect them. Constantly compensate and let them know that they're not failures and they can do things on their time, that you see their efforts, that you see them trying their hardest. I always pushed myself, but I was never happy because I had this nagging voice that told me I fucking sucked that haunts me to today. I moved to South America for years to do humanitarian, I went special forces, I got out and worked so damn hard I had no personal life until finally I just snapped and went into drugs and alcohol. I had many nights sitting on the edge of my bed with my pistol in my mouth telling myself I was a coward for not pulling the trigger. One more thing to fail. My wife saved me, but at the cost of her health. She's a fucking angel. If I would have had just one person growing up to tell me I'm worthy and respected and capable, I would be an entirely different person. Do not tell yourself, they know I love them. Do not tell yourself, they seem resilient despite this. Get your kids' asses into therapy, too. You do not know the galaxy-sized monster this is brewing under the surface in their development. It will destroy them.
As a child from a broken home, let me tell you this. My parents had the exact same dynamic. I hated them both. Developed crippling anxiety and severe depression. Suicidal ideation became a near constant companion for years, and had no self-esteem. It's not been until these last few years that I've been able to correct years of neglect and abuse through therapy and medication. Even to this day, I'm still rooting out toxic messages left by my upbringing. You can't fix her. Your wife has chosen to be this way. Chosen to subject you and your kids to this abuse. Stop allowing your kids to live on the front lines of a marriage that has become a battlefield. Divorce. It's better to have two homes rather than a single broken one. Trust me on this. I wished every day my parents would divorce.
I think someone needs to tell her that she's unlikely to have relationships with her children when they become adults at this rate. If she values those relationships, she needs to change her tune in a major way.
I have a mom just like that. It's damn exhausting. I avoid spending time with her now, and yes, this does affect your children. My anxiety and depression may not have been her fault, but it sure didn't help none. You can't fix anyone if they don't see an issue. When it hurts to be with someone then alone, I usually say it's time to call it quits.
My guess is that your wife has low self-esteem. She attempts to deal with this problem by attacking the self-esteem of the people around her. Her answer to her problem does not work. When she criticizes someone, she feels better about herself for a little while, but then it's back to normal and she needs to do it again unless she figures out her problem and gets some help with it. She will keep on criticizing until she winds up all by herself. You said it yourself. She cannot maintain good long-term relationships with anyone. Unfortunately, that includes you and the kids. Think about what she is doing to your mental health. How much longer can you put up with this? And then think about the mental health of your kids.
I think someone needs to tell her that she's unlikely to have relationships with her children when they become adults at this rate. If she values those relationships, she needs to change her tune in a major way.
If you've been to therapy and counseling and after that, this is the state of your marriage mate. Wake up, smell the coffee, and do what you know needs to be done in your gut. It sounds like the longer you keep this going, the greater and greater the damage control becomes on your kids. My girlfriend and several friends of mine who all had their parents divorce all tell me the exact same thing. I just wish they did it sooner. Kids can process, mommy and daddy are not in love with each other anymore but still want us to grow up happily. What kids cannot process as well is, why are mommy and daddy constantly fighting and hating each other if they're supposed to be in love? Why does mommy make me cry, even after daddy tries to help me? There are a lot of ifs, buts, ands, maybes with a topic like this, but there's one definitive thing here: parental toxicity will fuck up a child for life if the root cause is not addressed.
The solution is rather simple. You have allowed yourself to become a subordinate. She does not feel that you are her equal. When she belittles your children, you must step in immediately. Tell the children to go to a separate room. Inform her that she needs to change immediately. Also inform her that from here on out you will work together regarding any criticism or concerns for your children. Leave a card for Valentine's Day. Nothing more, nothing less. My guess is she has done nothing for you on Valentine's Day. Consult a divorce attorney after 15 years. I doubt she will change. Get your affairs in order. The chances of you lasting another 15 years are very slim. I do. However, I wish you the best of luck. It will be difficult, but it is necessary. Remember to assure her that your actions come from a place of love.
What stuck out to me in your post is that she doesn't have friends because of this behavior, so what does that say to you? I foresee a very miserable and lonely old age for you and your wife. It won't just be your kids that don't come around. I would guess that those friendships she let die, your words, were actually with people who couldn't be happier to not be part of her life. I hope you will be able to tolerate her negativity when it's just you and she in the house and you've no social circle because she's so miserable to be around. But maybe you'll handle it like my dad. He spent as much time out of the house as possible when he retired.
This has been her behavior since the beginning. Then what do you want us to say? You should never have married her. No force on earth will change her now. If even therapy and couples therapy has failed, this is her, now and forever. Learn to love it, or learn to blank it out, or divorce, or build a time machine and break up with her 15 years ago. There is no magic conversation or activity or therapy or drug that will make her into someone more tolerable. You chose this woman knowing she was like this. Enjoy. Seriously? She is torturing you and your kids. End this. Take the kids. Sue for 100% custody. Get on with it. If not for yourself, then for your poor kids.
Leave her. You don't want to live your whole life like that. And I hope you can take custody of the kids, or at least half of it.
My parents are like that too. They should have divorced at least 30 years ago, but they always had a good idea excuse. We're not going to separate because of children, grandchildren. Then we're too old for that now. Today my father is 76 years old and has major health problems. My mother refuses to help him or to accept that someone comes to help him since he can no longer wash himself. Their bathroom should be redone to install a shower rather than a bath. My mother refuses because she likes to take baths. It's not true. She takes a bath maybe once a year, and they can afford it. We tried 1,000 times to explain to her that he has cognitive problems and that it's not worth yelling at him. She doesn't believe us. If he can't concentrate, she yells at him to tell him to concentrate. And she's a retired nurse. There is a social worker who will come to their home this week to see what help we could put in place. In short, do you want to be in the same situation at 75? If you are weak, disabled, sick, it will not get better.
I divorced, after 18 plus years, who was almost an identical representation of what you describe. Life is better, now. We too had a child, was 16 at the time of divorce, and I stayed with her mostly because of the kids. In hindsight, I'm still uncertain if wasting an extra 5 to 10 years of my life was worth the benefit of staying together for our daughter, but it most likely was. If we had split early, daughter likely would have been in mom's custody, and would have turned out not as well.
I'd recommend reading Nonviolent Communication to learn how to communicate your feelings and needs in a more effective and compassionate way. Right now, how you're giving her feedback is making her defensive and double down. If you phrase it with NVC techniques, I think you'll have better insight and maybe success. For example, don't use absolutes like, you always do this. Say, when you blah blah blah, I feel blank because I need blank. Would you be open to blank in the future? For example, she may saying something critical to you about past Valentine's days. If you say, you're being critical and ruining my mood. Tell me something positive instead. Is less likely to be effective then. When you bring up things you don't like about our past, I feel hurt, because I love you and want us to have a healthy relationship, or something like that. And she could use NVC to phrase why a situation makes her so negative in the first place. She may still dismiss what you say, but at least you'll have better insight into yourself and more compassion for you and your family through this NVC practice. And you could read Set Boundaries, Find Peace to learn how to set boundaries without coming across as controlling. Like, instead of telling someone what to do, don't shout at me. Say, I don't feel comfortable when you shout at me. I'm going to take a 5-minute break and we can discuss this in a healthy way when we're both emotionally regulated. While being around someone so negative can be super draining, you likely could work on improving your communication better too.
You don't owe her anything if you ask her what she wants and she doesn't tell you. Don't get her anything. Set boundaries as soon as the criticism starts, dismiss or trivialize it. I'll bet she nags you and finds things you have to do right away when you're doing your own thing. Say no. She doesn't get to control your time or agenda. I'm sure you feel guilty, but realize this is a behavior derived from insecurity, so obliging only perpetuates it. She'll throw a tantrum initially and it will cause more conflict, but you're entitled to respect. If she can't work as a team, then she can do it herself.
My mom is exactly like your wife. My dad is like you, but constantly makes excuses for my mom. I no longer speak to either of them. Growing up with a mom like that was an awful nightmare, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I tell my fiancé all the time, I didn't enjoy my childhood. I merely survived it. I grew up chasing her approval and never got it. She tore me down even when I tried my best. This translated to me constantly chasing external validation, affection, and led me to some very toxic relationships in my early 20s. It also led to having no self-esteem, suicidal ideation, inability to navigate relationships, people-pleasing, etc. AKA, it utterly ruined me. Forget about changing your wife. She doesn't want to change and won't change. But your kids, OMG, please, for the love of God and all things holy, protect them. Take a look at RCPTSD if you're curious to see what their future will be like if things don't change. It's complex post-traumatic stress disorder and is manifested by being in a prolonged trauma state, traumatic environment.
I have a wife like that. I'm divorcing her. Like right now, we are in the middle of a divorce. It sucks and it's a bit painful due to the financial aspect, but overall, I am so much better off. My stress levels have dropped tremendously, and I am much more peaceful, and I don't have to worry about walking on eggshells or what I will do to piss her off today. My mental health has improved exponentially. I am so glad I left.
You owe it to your kids to get them out of that toxicity. Even if it's only for half the time is better than all the time. And then you have to think about yourself. Eventually your kids are going to grow up and leave, and it will just be you and her, and you will be bearing the brunt of far more of her negativity. I would suggest getting some therapy for just yourself. Possibly someone who specializes in PTSD. Those therapists understand how to give you coping mechanisms that will help you understand if you really want to leave or not. I will warn you, divorcing people like this is a living nightmare. So you better have all your ducks in a row if you decide to go through with it, and you can probably expect she is going to badmouth you to the kids and everyone she knows, and make the majority of your co-parenting as difficult as possible. But if you only experience the abuse sometimes, rather than regularly, you'll be a happier person and you'll have better memories with your kids. I remember the first time I took a vacation with my kids without my ex, and it was so pleasant. No one fought. No one had to walk on eggshells. There were no embarrassing outbursts, no crying. We just had fun. You get one life. Do you really want to live it in misery?
You should hang out around loud machinery without ear protection until you are stone deaf. Do not buy hearing aids. Problem solved.
I think she needs to be in regular talk therapy, continuing, and you guys should get back into counseling. Sit her down without the kids there and have a serious talk with her about the criticism. Ask her if she likes living this way and whether or not she thinks this is the best way to solve problems, or if there might be a different way.
My dad is like this. He told me he doesn't think a counselor will be able to help him. I disagree, but whatever, once he's decided he's not going to enjoy something, he is a negative grumpy downer, and it ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. The most recent example was, I asked him what he'd like for dinner and listed off a number of fish options as we were getting a takeaway from a place that did some nice seafood. He went, "Ugh, well, it's all farmed anyway." The only thing I've found remotely helpful is to keep pointing it out. Just keep saying, "That was unnecessary," or, "You being so negative is bringing me down," etc. Sadly, I think some people don't change. They are just fucking miserable assholes. I believe he was like this because of my mother, who was incredibly critical. As others have said, having a parent who you constantly feel the need to impress is tough. You never feel like you're good enough. I am 34 years old and a chronic people pleaser. I am in counseling as I just can't relax if I have a notion that anyone is remotely unhappy with me.
This is sad to hear, but I get it. Divorce is so fucking debilitating, but it sounds like for the better.